My father-in-law handed me a glass of whiskey, fully expecting me to drink it, but something in his eyes made me pause. That kind of smile, too polite, too rehearsed, the kind that hides a plan. Something told me this wasn't just a toast. So I didn't drink. I smiled, excused myself to help in the kitchen. That's when I saw her, Margot, holding 2 fresh glasses of sangria. Not the whiskey Ronald had just given me. One already filled. The other, she was just finishing. Then I saw her do it. A tiny vial. Clear. Unlabeled. She tipped a few drops into the second glass, then slipped the vial into her purse. Like it never existed. She turned, saw me, smiled too quickly. "This one's for you," she said. "Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." My hands didn't shake. My heart did. I took both glasses from her and quietly swapped them. Not with mine, with Ronald's. No scene, no words, just a quiet return to the table. The birthday candles hadn't even been blown out yet. 30 minutes later, he collapsed, sweating, vomiting, barely conscious. The doctors called it food poisoning. I let them. It gave me time to disappear the real story, just long enough to investigate. That drink was meant for me. What would you do if your in-laws tried to erase you from their daughter's life? Not with words, but with one quiet sip? My name is Caleb Dawson. I'm 35, a filmmaker. And this is how a single drink changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and family. They never said it to my face, but I knew I wasn't the man they pictured for their daughter. I didn't come for money. I didn't wear tailored suits. I didn't talk about stock options over dinner. I was the kind of man who carried stories, not briefcases. And that made me dangerous. We met at a film festival in Portland. She was giving a talk on environmental policy. I had just screened a short doc about farmers losing land to developers. She asked a question. I answered nervously. We talked for 3 hours after the panel ended. Samantha saw me, not just the camera or the rough edges. She saw something I didn't even fully believe in yet. A future, with her in it. She didn't care that I lived in a 1-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop, or that my company car was a dusty old Jeep with no AC. She liked that I cared about stories, about people, about truth. I loved that about her too. She could walk into a gala in heels and then spend the next day barefoot in a stream, collecting water samples. She was bold, brilliant, grounded, and she chose me. But when I met her parents, I realized I wasn't the kind of man they thought their daughter would end up with. Margot wore Chanel. I wore flannel. Ronald had a cigar collection. I had old camera lenses wrapped in socks. They smiled, of course. But behind the smiles were questions they never asked out loud. How long is this little artist phase going to last? When will she come to her senses? They never said I didn't belong. They just made sure I felt it. Margot introduced me at parties as Samantha's friend who works in media. Ronald once asked me what my exit plan was. I told him I hoped I didn't need one. He didn't laugh. I remember one Christmas, they gifted Samantha a luxury watch. They gave me a book, How to Think Bigger, From Passion to Profit, still shrink-wrapped. I said thank you. I always said thank you. At first, I believed I could win them over. That if I kept showing up calm, kind, consistent, they'd come around. So I smiled. I offered to help with dishes. I brought nice wine. I sent them links to interviews I did on NPR. Nothing changed. But over time, I stopped trying. Because I realized, some people aren't waiting for you to prove your worth. They're waiting for you to admit you don't have any. And that's when I made peace with it. I didn't need their blessing. Because Samantha was never something I want. She was someone who chose me over and over again. That's what made her parents so nervous. We were building something they couldn't control. And control is all they've ever known. So when Ronald collapsed that night, halfway through his own birthday toast, I realized the poison wasn't just in the drink. It was in the way they lived. And they weren't finished. I thought it was over. Just a strange, cruel twist at a family dinner. But the real plan? It wasn't Ronald's. It was Margot's. It wasn't until later. After the hospital visit, after the excuses, after the whole family pretended like nothing had happened, that I started to notice the pattern. Margot didn't raise her voice. She didn't slam doors or throw tantrums. No. She played a longer game. Subtle, polished, effective. Her tactics looked like kindness on the surface. An email forwarded to Samantha titled, "A great article about financial stability in marriage." a surprise dinner reservation when she knew I had a premiere that night, or the time she accidentally sent us a wedding photo of Samantha and her ex, Thomas, with the caption, "What a beautiful moment this was." I'd never met Thomas, but they talked about him like he was the one that got away. It always looked innocent, just a slip, a coincidence, a caring suggestion. But it wasn't. She was rewriting the story, one little moment at a time. Ronald was more direct. He once offered me a contact at his firm, said I should consider a real job now that I was part of the family. When I politely declined, he told me over scotch, "Being passionate is cute. Being broke isn't." And every time Samantha stood up for me, they found a new way to make her feel guilty. "We just want what's best for you. We're not against him. We're just concerned. You're so emotional lately. Maybe talk to someone?" I started to see the moves for what they were. A playbook. Control masked as concern. Guilt disguised as guidance. Sabotage dressed in silk. But what scared me wasn't what they were doing to me. It was what they were doing to her. Samantha started second-guessing herself, apologizing more, pulling back from her own dreams. Not because she didn't believe in them, but because the two people who raised her were quietly, consistently telling her she shouldn't. And that was the hardest part. Not the passive-aggressive comments, not the thinly veiled jabs, but watching the woman I love start shrinking to fit their version of her. Sometimes, the most dangerous manipulation doesn't scream. It whispers. At first, I told myself this was just how rich families work. Different priorities, different values. But deep down, I knew this wasn't just cultural. It was calculated. And the deeper I looked, the clearer it became. They weren't just trying to push me out. They were trying to break her down, piece by piece. That's when I stopped trying to earn their respect and started paying closer attention. Because the night of the birthday dinner, I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. Something in the kitchen. Something that didn't make sense. Until it was almost too late. And what I found didn't just change the story, it changed the rules of the game. It started with a clink. Just a soft sound. Glass against glass. Coming from the kitchen while everyone else was laughing at the table. I had offered to help with dessert. Margot said no. Firm. But sweet. "Relax, Caleb. Your family." But something about the way she said it. Too quick. Too polished. Too much like a line she'd practiced. So I got up anyway. Quietly. When I stepped into the kitchen, she didn't hear me right away. She was holding 2 glasses of sangria. Separate from the others. One already filled. The other, she was just finishing. Then I saw her do it. A tiny vial. Clear. No label. She tipped a few drops into one of the glasses. Then slipped the vial back into her purse like it never existed. The air shifted. She turned. Saw me. For a moment, her mask slipped. "Oh, Caleb. I've got it. This one's for you. Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law." Her voice didn't shake, but her eyes did. I took the glasses from her hands, smiling. "Let me help. Looks heavy." Then I walked back to the table, heart pounding so loud it drowned out the conversation. Ronald was checking his phone. I set the glass down in front of him, and I waited. 30 minutes later, he collapsed. In the panic that followed, Margot was the perfect wife. Worried, gracious, in control. Must have been the shrimp. "He hasn't been sleeping well. He'll be fine. Just a little episode." No one questioned her. Why would they? Margot Landry knew how to play a scene. But across the room, our eyes met. And in that brief second of silence, I saw the truth in her face. She hadn't made a mistake. She had made a decision. I didn't confront her. Not there. Not yet. I just sat down, ate a slice of cake I couldn't taste, and thought about the moment I saw her add those drops. And the moment she realized I'd seen. There are 2 kinds of power. The kind people chase, and the kind they protect at all costs. That night, I saw the second kind. And I knew I wasn't just married into a wealthy family. I had married into a system of silence. So I did the only thing I could think of. I took the untouched glass, the one she had meant for me, and slipped it into my camera bag, just in case. Because if I was right, I'd need proof. And if I was wrong, well, that was something I could live with. But what I found next proved I wasn't wrong. Not even a little. The next morning, I stared at the glass on my kitchen counter. It looked ordinary. Just a half-drunk sangria in a heavy crystal tumbler. Still cold. Still dangerous. I had tucked it into my camera bag after the party. wrapped in a clean lens cloth like it was part of a kit, not a potential crime scene. I didn't sleep that night, just kept replaying her words. Special recipe for my favorite son-in-law. If I hadn't seen her, if I'd just trusted the moment, would I have even made it home? I called a friend, Jason, a former client, now a chemist at a toxicology lab. He owed me a favor. Didn't ask too many questions. Personal or professional? He asked. Family, I said. That was all he needed to know. I dropped the glass off the same day. Wrapped. Sealed. Anonymous. 3 days later, Jason called. Caleb, there were benzodiazepines in that drink. Nothing lethal, but enough to knock someone off balance, make them miss a premiere. Forget everything they'd said, or worse, say things they shouldn't. I sat down. In my world, one bad interview can kill a whole project. One misstep, and a year's worth of work is gone. Maybe that's all she needed. I stood in my living room holding the phone. The sun was streaming through the window. Samantha was upstairs folding laundry, humming, and I just stood there, staring at nothing. This was real. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't bad shrimp. It wasn't a dream. It was deliberate. I didn't tell Samantha. Not yet. I needed more than just proof in a vial. I needed to understand why. Because Margot didn't strike me as reckless. She was careful, controlled. And if she was willing to risk everything with something like that, it meant this went deeper than I thought. Sometimes, truth doesn't free you. It forces you to act. So I started digging. Old pharmacy records, public databases, private whispers. I followed the trail like I would a story. Carefully, patiently, one thread at a time. And what I found wasn't just about me. Margot had done this before. Maybe not with drinks, but with people. At first, it was just a hunch. Something about Margot's precision didn't feel new. It felt rehearsed, practiced. Like this wasn't the first time she'd played this game, just the first time someone saw it. So I started tracing backward, not through her emails or credit cards, but through people. People Samantha used to know, used to love, used to trust. Her college roommate, Bethany. We'd met once. She liked me. I called her, carefully, cautiously. Caleb, she said. I'm glad you called. I never understood what really happened between Sam and Thomas. Thomas, the name I'd heard over and over again, usually in passing, in half compliments. Thomas was always so driven. Thomas's family had a vineyard. Thomas got into Johns Hopkins. I'd never met him, never felt threatened, until now. So I reached out. He was quiet at first, guarded, but when I told him what had happened at the birthday dinner, his voice shifted. You know, he said. When I told Samantha what Thomas had said, she sat still for a long time. Then she whispered, I believed them. I thought if I let myself question it, I'd lose my family. That's when I realized this wasn't the first time they'd made her choose. I tried to explain. But by then, it didn't matter. She didn't trust herself anymore. That's what they took from her. I hung up and just sat there. Not because I didn't believe him, but because now I could see it. Every accidental moment. Every subtle doubt, every gentle nudge toward someone safer, someone better. And it hadn't started with me. There were others too. Old friends who disappeared from her life after family vacations. Coworkers she stopped seeing after her parents raised concerns. They never banned people outright. They just made them inconvenient. And over time, Samantha's world shrank, piece by piece, decision by decision, until the only voices left were theirs. That's the thing about control. It doesn't always look like a cage. Sometimes, it looks like protection. I started to understand it. What Margot feared wasn't me. It was what I represented. A life she couldn't script. A story she couldn't rewrite. And now, with Samantha choosing me, Margot was losing control again, which meant she wouldn't stop. Not until I was gone. Not until Samantha doubted me, the same way she'd once doubted Thomas. And if that was the playbook, I needed a new strategy. Because this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about saving the person I loved from a story she didn't even know she was trapped in. And the first step was turning the camera around. I'd spent years documenting other people's truths. Strangers, activists, families and places most people never think about. I knew how to listen, how to wait, how to catch the moment when the mask slips. Even for just a second. Now, it was my turn to watch my own life through a lens. Not just as a husband, but as a storyteller. Because if Margot and Ronald were writing their version of events, I was going to start filming mine. It started with the little things. A mic clipped under the dining table during Sunday lunch. A wide-angle camera tucked between recipe books on the kitchen shelf. My phone recording by accident when conversations shifted. It wasn't about catching them in some explosive act. It was about documenting the pattern. The tone in Ronald's voice when he asked about my income. The pause in Margot's smile when Samantha mentioned a trip we planned without them. The way they both looked at each other when I walked into a room, like they were keeping score. I didn't tell Samantha, not because I didn't trust her, but because I needed her to see. Not just here. I needed her to watch the way her parents really spoke about me, when they thought no one was listening. Sometimes, the most powerful story isn't the one you tell. It's the one you show. So I compiled it all. Little moments. Snippets. Quiet, damning truths. Margot suggesting to Ronald that Samantha might be too tired to think clearly these days. Ronald saying, he's not going to last, you know. She needs someone who can carry her. Not make her carry him. There was no shouting. No name-calling. Just the slow erosion of trust, served with wine and birthday cake. And then, one day, I caught something more. Margot on the phone, in the backyard, not knowing my mic was live. He's getting in the way, Ron. This is our last shot. Once she's pregnant, it's over. We'll never get her back. I listened to the playback 3 times. Each word like a brick in a wall that had been quietly built behind me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat at my desk with all the footage. Labeled. Dated. Backed up twice. And I realized something. This wasn't just a toxic family. It was a system. A system that only worked if no one ever pressed record. But I had. And now, I had a choice. I could keep collecting. Or I could show Samantha. All of it. Because the only thing stronger than control is truth. And I was done letting them narrate our story. It was time to hit play. It was a quiet Sunday. Cloudy. Cold. The kind of day that makes you want to stay inside. I asked Samantha if she wanted to watch something with me. What kind of something? She smiled. A story. I said. What I've been working on. About us. She looked confused. A little amused. But she nodded. I plugged in my laptop. Opened a folder. Clicked play. At first, she thought it was a montage. Clips of us at family dinners. Me setting up my camera. Her mother offering wine. Her father laughing at a joke I didn't make. Then the tone shifted. The audio began to change. Margot, in the kitchen. He's not going to last. Ronald, in the study. We just need to remind her who she is. Then, her voice again. Barely a whisper, but clear as glass. Once she's pregnant, it's over. We'll never get her back. Samantha froze. She stared at the screen. Then at me. Then back at the screen. She didn't speak. Not during the next clip. Not during the 3rd or 4th. She watched her mother fake a toast. Her father roll his eyes as I shared good news. Her parents planning moments behind closed doors. With calm, calculated precision. By the time the video ended, the room felt heavy. Samantha didn't cry. Not at first. She just whispered, "How long have you known?" I sat beside her. Long enough to be sure. But not long enough to stop loving them for your sake. That broke something in her. She covered her face. And the tears came fast. Like a dam giving way after too many quiet years. I thought I was crazy, she said. Every time I doubted them, I felt guilty. Like I was betraying my own family. I held her hand. You weren't crazy. You were conditioned to question your instincts. That's not love. That's control. We sat like that for a long time. Not talking. Just sitting. Breathing. 2 people who had lived in the same story. But finally read the same chapter. The truth doesn't always set you free. Sometimes, it breaks your heart first. And then, if you let it, it builds something new. That night, Samantha didn't call her parents. She didn't yell. She didn't send the video. She just said, I need time. I need space. And I need to decide what kind of daughter I want to be. And what kind of woman I want to become. The next day, Margot called twice. We didn't answer. Because for the first time, we weren't reacting. We were choosing. And that's when the package arrived. No return address. Just a small box. A USB drive inside. And a note, written in neat, familiar handwriting. You should see this too. Claire. We waited until after dinner. Samantha lit a candle. I made tea we wouldn't drink. The USB sat between us on the table. Small. Plain. Quietly loaded with whatever truth Claire thought we needed. Do you think it's about the drink? Samantha asked. Yes, I said. But I think it's not just about what happened to us. Claire wants us to see the whole pattern. I plugged it in. A single folder appeared, for her eyes too. Inside were 5 video files. No titles, just dates, all from inside the Landry house. But before we hit play, my mind drifted. Claire and Graham were always there. At birthdays, holidays, family dinners. Always polite. Always present. Always, just out of focus. Graham was Samantha's older brother. The golden son, the peacekeeper. A financial advisor in navy suits and neutral opinions. The kind of man who always looked like he was about to agree with you. Claire was his wife. Soft-spoken, thoughtful. The kind of person who noticed everything but said very little. She helped in the kitchen. Took photos at family parties. Smiled enough to stay invisible. I used to think they were lucky. That they'd figured out how to live with Ronald and Margot without being consumed by them. But now, I wondered if they had simply learned how to survive them. Smiling, nodding, playing along, until they couldn't anymore. Samantha sat still beside me. She clicked the first video. It opened with Ronald pacing the living room. Claire must have been recording quietly from the kitchen doorway. "You're being dramatic," Ronald snapped. Graham chose her. You didn't like it. But he made his decision. Then Margot's voice. Colder than I'd ever heard her. "No. He made a mistake. Claire doesn't elevate him. She limits him. If he won't act, we will. He's not the only one with options." The second clip was shorter. Claire and Graham in their guest room. Claire was angry, but calm. "They told you I was having an affair, didn't they?" Graham didn't speak, just stared down at his hands. "They showed you fake emails. You believed them, and now you're too ashamed to admit it." The third clip had no faces, just audio. Margot on the phone, not knowing she was being recorded. "Caleb listens too much. He pays attention. That makes him dangerous." A pause. Then, "They're getting serious. If she gets pregnant, he'll be stuck. They always fold." Samantha inhaled sharply. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. The final clip loaded slowly. Claire, looking directly into the camera. Her voice calm. Her eyes tired. "Sam, if you're watching this, it means I finally stopped being afraid. I loved this family once. I thought if I smiled enough, they'd love me back. Instead, they erased me. Manipulated Graham. Made me feel like I was the problem. And now they're doing it to you. You're stronger than I was. You always have been. But even strong women fall when they're made to doubt themselves long enough. Don't let them write your story for you. Because if you don't fight for your life now, they'll shape it until it's no longer yours." The room went quiet. Samantha stared at the screen. Not crying. Not blinking. Just seeing. She knew. She said softly, "All this time." Claire knew. "And they tried to bury her for it," I said. "Some truths don't break you. They wake you. And once you're awake, you can't go back to sleep." That night, we didn't speak much. But I saw something shift in Samantha's eyes. Not rage. Not sadness. Resolve. The next morning, she made the call. "Mom," she said, "we need to talk. All of us. Tonight." Because what was coming next wasn't just a conversation. It was reckoning. Because what was coming next wasn't just a conversation. It was reckoning. The Landry house looked exactly the same. White shutters, perfect lawn, curated calm. Inside, the table was already set. Crystal glasses. Roast in the oven. Margot greeted us with her usual practiced grace. "Darling, you look tired," she told Samantha. "Marriage will do that." Claire and Graham were already seated. Ronald poured wine. We all smiled through silence. After dessert, I stood up. "I brought something," I said. "It won't take long, but it's important." I opened my laptop, plugged in the USB, turned the screen to face them, pressed play. Margot's voice filled the room. "She doesn't elevate him, she limits him. They're getting serious. If she gets pregnant, he'll be stuck. They always fold." No one moved. Ronald blinked. Claire looked down. Graham just froze, but his jaw clenched. And when the screen went dark, he whispered, "Claire, I'm sorry." Just 3 words. But they were the first real thing he'd said in years. "This is manipulated," Margot finally snapped. "You're twisting things." "It's your voice, Mother," Samantha said calmly. "In your house. Saying exactly what you meant." The room shifted. Claire spoke softly. "I stayed quiet for years. Tried to survive this family by disappearing inside it. But silence only protects the wrong people. No yelling. No slamming doors. Just the quiet unraveling of control. We left before coffee. No goodbyes. Just coats, keys, and the sound of finally stepping away. That night. Samantha slept through the night. No tossing, no tears. Claire texted later. You gave her back her voice. That's more than most of us ever get. And in the morning. She smiled, like someone who finally knew which story was hers to tell. We didn't win a war. We just walked out of one. A few weeks later. When Samantha told them about the baby, they didn't argue. They didn't give advice. They just paused. Margot sent a handwritten card. Not sentimental. Not apologetic. Just 5 words. Let us know what you need. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't a reset. But it was the first time. They didn't try to rewrite the story. Truth didn't destroy our family. It revealed the one we were meant to build on our own terms. Have you ever had to choose between your truth and your peace? Tell me your story. I'm listening.